Andy, always good to talk with you. Hope you're staying well and corona-free.
I am, Dana. I hope you're good too.
Dan, we are doing very well. Thank you. Of course, you were the first person that I thought of. I thought I want to have Andy McCarthy discuss this because when the president said it, and I know that there's a lot of nuance here and there's a lot of things that must be in place first before that can be, whether or not he's going to convene Congress for recess appointments, whether or not that's actually something constitutionally that he can do. What are the limitations to that power?
You know, Dana, the interesting thing with this and with a lot of the issues that we're now dealing with on a daily basis as the government grapples with how to handle this crisis, I find that all of these issues are kind of hitting us over the head with a reality we don't think of very often, which is that we like to think of ourselves as a rule of law society and that the law controls everything. And in fact, we're actually much more of a political than a legal body in that the Constitution mainly relies on, the political division of responsibilities and that the public at the ballot box controls a lot of what is going on. And to be a little more concrete about it, the president can't possibly do what he's suggesting, mainly because it's up to the Congress to decide whether it's in recess or not and what its procedures are. The Constitution puts the Congress in charge of that. No court in America is going to tell Congress that it is or is not in session. Congress gets to decide that. So the president can't do recess appointments unless Congress is in recess. And Congress is not in recess if it says it's not in recess. And if it's, even if it's doing it by means of these
the pro forma sessions,
these pro forma thing. And I understand the president's frustration about that. And I imagine the public looks at this and scratches its head and wonders, why, if we have a crisis going on, Congress is not in session doing work.
Right.
But the check on them is supposed to be the ballot box, not a lawsuit in court. And I don't think the president should be doing recess appointments anyway. This isn't the 18th century anymore where we have a hard time getting Congress in session and, it's hard for them to get to Washington. And, we can convene this government in a heartbeat. And if they allow them to operate remotely, it'll be even easier than, the traveling technology makes it.
Right.
So I think it's a lot of hullabaloo about nothing.
Yeah, not to get into the weeds too legally with it, but I know that there was I was reading a couple of different pieces debating as to whether or not it could even be done. Doesn't Congress have to not agree on a particular date of adjournment before this can even be invoked?
I think that's right. I mean, it's been a while since I looked into this, but Congress has really supreme authority over its procedures and its scheduling. When Congress is in recess, the president has some authority to call it into session.
Right.
But if Congress says it's in session now, then it's in session.
Officially in session.
And whether the president likes the quote unquote sham proceedings or not, they're still proceeding.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if it's the pro forma sessions or not. It still technically applies. You have written a really great piece. This was from about a week ago. Authoritarian overreach. You were talking about the extreme measures that there were a lot of states and localities are enacting in order for the public good, Andy, to keep everyone safe.
Right.
And in Michigan, one of the things that really I found really interesting as part of Gretchen Whitmer, the governor there, her shutdown, is she even banned people from going to their vacation homes, even if it's a cabin on the lake. That's banned, which I thought I'd never realized that can the government actually block you from going to your own home because it's still your home, even if it's your second one.
Well, there is some authority, for example, from the 1940s with the idea that, say the government knew that you showed up after traveling someplace where yellow fever was rampant.
Right.
If they had good proof of that, they could quarantine you against your own will, as long as again, this could not be done on a lark. They would have to have actual hard evidence that you were a threat to people. So, yeah, they do have some authority. But on the other hand, as the Justice Department said in a very interesting filing that they made in Greenville, Mississippi, where they got involved in this litigation about drive-in religious services in the parking lot of a church, a pandemic doesn't suspend the Bill of Rights. And you still have your fundamental liberties. And the clash here, the tension between them, the government's legitimate pursuit of things it's allowed to do, and your individual liberty, is they're allowed to burden it if there's a crisis, but they have to do it in the least restrictive way that's practical under the circumstances. And happily, I can report, Dana, that the Justice Department intervened in this case where I think preposterously the town of Greenville, Mississippi, was preventing this church from holding these communal services in the parking lot, even though people were in their cars with the windows rolled up and they were maintaining social distance and all that stuff. And Mississippi allows you to drive up to a drive-in restaurant, and in close quarters with the wheels rolled down or the windows rolled down, you can, transact business and get food. But they were telling people they can't go to religious services that actually observe the social distancing. The Justice Department intervened on that on behalf of the worshipers, and the town has backed off. So I think we have a different kind of Justice Department now, where the civil rights of Americans, including their religious liberties, are going to be defended, which is refreshing.
Exactly. I read that. I read what William Barr had sent out, and I thought he made very great points. It was very succinct. And, if people can go to Walmart, then they can socially distance the way that they've been doing at some of these churches. And you're right. I mean, just because no matter what the variable is, rights cannot be taken despite the variable. And I know that there's some memes going around about that, which is very fascinating. So two things. You've written a great piece about the World Health Organization funding, but you also wrote a piece in relation to the reason we shut everything down was because of the projections we were getting on fatalities, and those projections, even when it was revised to the 100 to 200,000, still included that social distancing. And you have a piece up from yesterday, the problem with New York City's death rate estimates as it relates to this pandemic. And I get the sense that people are so incredibly confused because I feel like different entities have different measures of tabulating these numbers, and that's why and we had the story just last segment where the New York Times was reporting that there were 3,700 some odd cases or individuals who had passed, and even though they were not tested, they were added to the coronavirus death toll. So tell us about this, because this is so confusing.
Yeah, it's just the more you look at this, and, they intimidate you or they try to, if you're not a medical professional, you're not a statistician, you didn't even stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, pretending to be one on television. But the fact is, we can all look at this stuff, and what's supposed to happen over time, and we're now been at this for 4 or 5 weeks, right? These numbers should be getting clearer to us. And the harder you look at them, the more like voodoo they are. And what we're now seeing is that the federal government, the CDC, there are financial incentives in getting these states to code cause of death when people die, to code it as coronavirus, code it as COVID-19. And we don't know, looking at these numbers, if it's, if somebody had the virus, did that mean they had the disease? Was the virus just present? Did it exacerbate what they call comorbidities, or, your underlying health causes? Was it really the proximate cause of death? And it just seems to me that, as you just pointed out, with the 3,700 that the New York just arbitrarily, well, maybe arbitrarily may overstate it, but New York just, on a kind of a loose theory, piled 3,700 casualties or fatalities. atop the national and the New York death toll, which raised the national death toll by 17%. So here we are 4 or 5 weeks into this, or whatever it is, and our numbers are getting more difficult to understand and more vague rather than less. And what I keep saying again and again is, I understand the difficulties they're dealing with. I understand the fact that testing hasn't been readily available, and therefore, to some degree, we must be undercounting, the exact number of people who had coronavirus when they died, and maybe the exact number of people for whom it was the proximate cause of death. But at the same time, we're making very important public policy decisions on the basis of these numbers. And the more you look at these numbers, every time you scratch beneath the surface a little bit, they're really not reliable.
Yeah, which is incredibly troubling, because we're told, oh, well, we can't open up in the manner or at the speed with which the administration would like. And then they cite these numbers, which may or may not be inflated due to either they're just confirming it, they just want to go on a hunch, and the financial incentive aspect of it is incredibly troubling. And it seems very like this, it's an ongoing vicious circle.
Yeah, it really, I remember I was still a government lawyer when 9/11 happened. And in the first weeks after 9/11, when we were in the command post near Ground Zero in New York City, we had good intelligence, or at least we thought it was good intelligence, that indicated that 9/11 might not be a one-off, that it might be the first of a series of attacks. And there was frenetic activity for that first 3 or 4 weeks because we really didn't understand what the threat was. And then as you got more remote from it, a lot of that stuff eased. Now, obviously we're still living with some of it that was overreach. But what you expect is going to happen is that as you get more remote from the start of things and you get to understand it better, the statistics get better, your understanding of the threat gets better, everything gets better. And here it just seems to me that we're heading in the other direction, that the numbers get fuzzier, and a lot of the stuff that the state and municipal governments are doing gets more draconian, and I think more politically motivated than motivated by public health.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the politics. It may be political science, but politics is not the same thing as actual science, definitely.
Right.
Goodness.
Right.
Goodness.
Right.
Andy McCarthy, author of Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. You can go and follow him on Twitter as well. It's Andrew C. McCarthy.